All right, good afternoon, everyone, and thank you for spending a few hours with us today. We're really excited about the content that we've been able to prepare and present to you, and the discussions that we're going to have during the breaks and the ones that we were having over lunch. So thank you again. We did this in San Francisco earlier this year in May, and we had a great turnout, and we thought, we got to take this on the road. And what's the first place we should go? New York, obviously. So here we are. So let me start by thanking our customer speakers who you're going to hear from. The first is going to be Capital One, and I think many people perceive Capital One to be one of the most innovative companies in financial services, kind of on the forefront in terms of technology adoption and implementation internally. So very excited about the partnership that we've been forming with Capital One over the past few years. The second will be Ramp, longtime ClickHouse user, both open source and on our cloud service, a diverse set of use cases here in New York. And then the third will be Modal Labs. So thank you in advance to those presenters. So we started this company almost 5 years ago, but the journey around ClickHouse started. Oh, there's the agenda, Keynote. All right, here's the journey. So ClickHouse was designed over 15 years ago by my co-founder, Alexey Milovidov, when he was inside Yandex. ClickHouse is short for Clickstream Data Warehouse. So Alexey was thinking about the data warehouse use case, long before we formed the company. He open sourced the technology in 2016, and that's where I first discovered it when I was at Elasticsearch. We started to see ClickHouse really emerge in popularity. And he had this monthly release cadence with this incredible feature set, where there were hundreds of contributors around the world working on the open source project. And during COVID, I stepped out of my previous company and thought, I need to start a company around ClickHouse. Just this technology is so innovative and disruptive. We need to put some muscle behind the project itself. And so we started the company, headquartered in Silicon Valley, typical venture-backed Silicon Valley startup. And then we started designing our cloud service, ClickHouse Cloud. And it took us about a year and a half to design what we call shared merge tree and a variety of other features. And then we launched the service on AWS. And there was a lot of latent demand of open source ClickHouse users or people that were using other technologies like Postgres who wanted to migrate to ClickHouse as part of a managed service. And it just took off. And we thought, all right, well, we need to be ubiquitous. We need to be on every cloud platform. So we then deployed on Google Cloud and then on Microsoft Azure. ClickHouse is very popular in Asia, so we formed a partnership with Alibaba in mainland China so that people could access these wonderful enterprise features that you'll be hearing more about throughout the day. And since then, we've been growing very quickly. We've made a number of acquisitions, for example, PureDB to enable CDC between Postgres or other transactional databases like Mongo and MySQL. You'll be hearing more about that throughout the day. Recently, HyperDX, which is a visualization layer. You'll be hearing from Mike Shih, the founder of that company, later this morning, and several others. So we've been growing quickly. We've raised quite a bit of venture capital just to make sure that we have the backing and the runway to kind of deliver on the vision behind the company. And then recently we deployed, so ClickHouse Cloud is a fully managed service, but we had customers say we need to run the data plane in our VPC. And so we recently launched a deployment model called Bring Your Own Cloud, where you can decouple the control plane from the data plane. And you'll be hearing more about that throughout the day. So that's kind of the journey that we've been on. But it all starts with you, the practitioners. And it really typically starts with open source historically. That's shifted a bit. Now people are moving to a managed service on day one. So if I could just see a show of hands of people that started with ClickHouse open source as their first kind of interaction with ClickHouse. If you wouldn't mind just giving me, great. So that's probably almost half the room started by using our open source. And you can just see how quickly ClickHouse has grown in terms of developer love and popularity. This is a kind of representation of our cloud service, ClickHouse Cloud, and the number of unique companies that are being deployed on it. We had a release this morning, a press release, where we announced that we now have over 2,000 customers running on ClickHouse Cloud across these 3 different cloud providers. And we add over 100 a month. And in fact, last month, we added over 200 new customers to ClickHouse Cloud. And just kind of a sampling of some of the companies who we're partnering with that are running these mission critical use cases on ClickHouse. You see some very innovative companies and a very diverse set of companies as well. And then the amount of data that we're now managing on behalf of our customers, over 30 petabytes in less than 3 years. And again, some great representation of local New York-based companies here on this slide as well. The company not only is very international, but so is our customer base. Over half of our employees are outside of the United States, and we've got now over 350 employees. But over half of our customers are outside of the United States. Over half of our revenue comes from outside of the United States. And I think now we're on Critica over 30 regions across these 3 different cloud providers. So maybe a quick show of hands, if you're using ClickHouse Cloud, maybe even if you're not using ClickHouse Cloud, I'd love to see, I'm gonna ask like 4 questions. Are you running on AWS? Are you running on Google Cloud? Are you running on Azure? Are you running on-prem? Or do you have a hybrid deployment model? I'd be curious to see how the market's voting these days. So if you're running solely on AWS or primarily on AWS, if you could just raise your hand. Okay, so that's a pretty significant part of the room. If you're running solely on Google Cloud or primarily on Google Cloud, if you could raise your hand. Okay, so probably about half as many on Google Cloud than we're on AWS. Azure, if you're running primarily on Microsoft Azure, well, that's interesting. That kind of maps to our customer base as well. So we kind of need to reboot our partnership with Microsoft. If you are running on-prem, if you could raise your hand. So you're still, you got to hold on to the data. You can't move it to a managed service for regulatory reasons or data privacy reasons, or you just like to hug your servers. Okay, and then a hybrid deployment model. You're like, we're not going to bet on one. We're gonna have a hybrid model. So there's quite a few of you there. All right. Well, the good news is we're here to support whatever deployment option you choose. So this is the company. I started it with Alexei, the creator of ClickHouse. He's based in Amsterdam. We've got a big office and engineering team there. And then our third co-founder, Yuri Izraelevsky, who I met when he was running engineering at Netflix, a very accomplished engineering executive who's been building distributed systems around open source for a better part of 20 years. And I, fortunately, to date myself, have been in and around open source for almost 30 years. My career started in the mid-90s at Sun Microsystems, where I was working on the Java station. And so I love engaging with the community. You're the reason we're here, and we're super grateful for your participation in what we're building. And that I mentioned kind of the international reach of the company. And so with that, I'm going to hand it over to Kritika. Kritika is based in the Bay Area with me, and she leads all of the product management efforts behind our managed service, ClickHouse Cloud. Welcome, Kritika.
Thank you, Aaron. I started with ClickHouse early days of building cloud, and one of the guiding principles was to ensure functional compatibility. So a query that's running in your open source works in ClickHouse Cloud. However, the architecture under the hood is fundamentally different. In self-managed ClickHouse, you typically tend to follow a shared nothing model. So your cloud compute and storage is coupled, often using expensive SSDs. So scaling is complex and slow. So you end up provisioning for peak and pay for the unused capacity. And with ClickHouse, that's why we changed the equation with separated compute and storage. The compute nodes are truly stateless. None of the metadata is managed within. It's centrally managed within a keeper. So as a result of which, when you scale, it's pretty seamless, and you only pay for what you use. And better yet, you can idle and not pay for any of your compute capacity. And this has been one of the main reasons why we've seen a lot of customers migrate. They're self-managed. Just when you compare and contrast, you get the flexibility of a fully managed service, elastic scale, and ultimately a lower total cost of ownership. And we didn't stop there. We've been building on this model, and more recently, we introduced this new feature that's been very widely adopted, which we call compute separation. Here, you're able to have multiple compute clusters and warehouses share the same underlying object storage to perform independent tasks without contending for resources. You're able to isolate reads and writes. So think of a large organization with multiple teams. In the old world, you had to replicate the data to do your analysis, even if it was the same data. And with this, you're able to much efficiently do this without having to contend for resources, simplifies management of the data and the operations around it. And not just that, we've been continuing to invest in our auto-scaling. ClickHouse Cloud supported vertical auto-scaling out the gate, and we've made significant improvements since introducing horizontal manual scaling. But more recently, we actually changed the underlying algorithm for scaling. And this was actually a complex effort that took multiple quarters to get right. And the reason is, in distributed systems, especially in a Kubernetes environment, these tend to follow a break first and make model. So in a scaling operation, you take out the old replica and add a replica of the desired size. So oftentimes, this in an overloaded system causes more strain and really disruptive to operations. And that's where the new model of scaling, which we call make before break, comes in, where we add a replica of the desired size, reroute queries, and only when it's safe to do so, remove the unused replicas. So this just gives you instant capacity when you need it without having to wait for the scale-up operation to complete, and better resource management overall, so just gives you a lot more flexibility. We'll soon be introducing horizontal auto-scaling, and the goal for this over time is to make sure that the service truly adapts to the nature of your workload, regardless of the size or shape, just giving you instant capacity where you need it, scale down when no longer in use, so you only, again, pay for what you use. And looking ahead, we have several areas of investment just building on this architecture, but we're calling it V2, really is around how do we push the needle further down the serverless vision that we set out to build. And one of the exciting projects, my favorite feature this year, is the distributed cache. As many of you know, object storage comes with a lot of advantages when it comes to cost, as well as limitless scale. But the major trade-off is the object storage latency access, so especially on cold reads. This is oftentimes counterintuitive for real-time analytic use cases. So that's where distributed cache comes in. It's a layer that's shared across multiple nodes that gives you instant access to hot data, so you have no more cold starts. So this is in preview in AWS and GCP. We're working towards GA in the coming months. Another that's along the same lines is how do we make sure that users are able to better manage their compute? That's where stateless workers comes in, whereby this is a lightweight stateless worker node where you can offload your compute-heavy operations such as merges and mutations. This, again, sort of lends itself naturally to the overall mission of better efficiency, better control, so you have predictable performance for especially your real-time analytics use cases. And one of the things that we are continuing to invest outside of our core infrastructure as we evolve is integrations. Over the years, we've added hundreds of language clients, connectors, plugins, and with the cloud service, we also have a managed ingest with ClickPipes, which lets you seamlessly ingest data from message brokers, transactional databases, and any other source where you have your data. And we're also building out the change data capture functionality from the different data sources. But more recently, we are doubling down on our efforts to have a much better integration with the Lakehouse ecosystem. We've seen a ton of traction, especially with Iceberg, and that's where we are pretty much doubling down. In the last 10 months, we've come full feature in terms of catalog integration with Polaris, AWS Glue, Unity, and we also have much better read performance on the Parquet reader. The V3 version gives you much faster reads, as well as discoverability of Iceberg tables. We have a session later today where Melvin will cover this in a lot more detail. This is essentially aligning with our overall mission. Wherever your data lives, we'll give you the scale, the capacity that you need. With that, it's my absolute pleasure to welcome on stage our Head of Product and Marketing, Tanya.
Thanks, Kritika. Hello, New York. It's good to see so many familiar faces here. Thank you for making the time, what I'm sure is a very busy week, to be with us here, even if just for a few hours. As Aaron mentioned, we've really taken a full day agenda and tried to compress it in just a few hours. So the rest of the talks are going to be organized in terms of use cases. What do you use ClickHouse for? whether you're using it on-prem or in the cloud, whether you're using our cloud service, or if you're self-managing it, you're using it to solve a problem. Maybe you're a developer that's developing a real-time app, and you realize that your existing technology no longer scales, and you need a new analytical database. Maybe you're an SRE or a DevOps team member that's looking for a new platform to power your observability efforts and more on top of that. Maybe you're a data engineer that's, as Kritika mentioned, looking for something different on top of your data lake as a query engine for real-time workloads. And all of us, frankly, at this point, are trying to figure out how to connect AI to our use cases. All of this is important, and we're going to try to organize the talks, both from our team members and from our customers in terms of these threads. It's going to go very, very fast. It's easy to deliver a 45-minute talk. You can talk for a while. You can kind of get going, finally get to the matter. It's much harder to give a 15-minute talk. So ahead of time, heads off to all of our speakers. It's going to be, kind of a program starting with one of our team members, then a customer, and you see how it's organized in terms of these use cases. So that's a day at a glance. We will give you one break. So Zoe is going to jump back on stage here and is going to say, look, you have a quick break. Please be prompt in coming back from that, because we have the rest of the program continuing. And of course, we're going to close with a reception. So the first use case, we're going to have Zach kick us off, real-time analytics. When somebody asks me, what is real-time analytics? The first thing that people usually think about is freshness of data. And of course, freshness of data is very important. Most of us run our businesses on data sets that are constantly refreshing. So of course, you need recent data. But to me, real-time analytics is not only recent data, it's also recent and historical data. We want to do recent analysis versus something that happened potentially quite a while back. And the most important part is actually the interactive part. It's the interactive filtering, interactive way to ask a question and the response comes back right away. One of our customers described it as building immersive data-driven applications. That's what real-time analytics is. Many times these applications are customer-facing, so also you need ability to access them from many, many different users of your SaaS service. That is what ClickHouse was built for. ClickHouse, by the way, stands for Clickstream Data Warehouse, Web Analytics, but these use cases expanded to many other industries since then. As Kritika mentioned, I lead both product and marketing. My marketing teams rely on services like Attentive, Braze, Klaviyo to keep us up to date on what's happening with our website visitors, how we should segment our audiences, our community common room. We rely on common room for our community metrics. All of that needs to be both recent and historical, and analysis needs to come up really, really fast. But in every industry out there, there is a vertical of use cases that's important to a CIO, CPO out there, where these real-time apps, I like to say, are eating the world. There's whole industries that honestly are born in that space. So we'll hear from Modal. When it comes to AI ML, any company in that space needs to not only provide a service, but also prove to you that AI is doing the right thing. And that relies on an analytical data set, right? You need to observe your own workload. That is just the core of every business out there. This is why ClickHouse has become part of what I call a default data stack at this point. Of course, you still need transactional databases like Postgres or maybe MySQL or document stores like MongoDB, but at this point, part of a default data stack is ClickHouse. You'll hear from Ramp later. They have this saying called just OLAP it, right? It's an OLAP technology. It basically means that for any sort of real-time app, you need to always have an analytical backend for these types of data sets. So Zach is going to walk through a series of announcements there in the first 15 minutes. After that, we're going to hear, again, from a customer, and then we'll go to Mike Shee, who joined us from HyperDX. It's a company that was building an observability stack on top of ClickHouse. And the reason they were doing that is because SREs and DevOps teams across the world started adopting ClickHouse shortly after it was open sourced for observability. Why, might you ask, right? There's, Splunk, like kind of a more traditional technology out there. There's been Elastic. And by the way, my history is that I came from Elastic, where I was responsible for observability use cases. Some of my customers in 2016 went to ClickHouse from Elastic. Why, might you ask? Again, it's a good technology for observability, for logging. The reason is observability data is getting first of all, more voluminous and also more structured over time. And so using a columnar database that's really been purpose-built for huge amounts of analytical data just makes sense in observability. Pretty much every data set out there. And many companies followed. So I had, eBay as an example, right? Move from Elastic to ClickHouse very early on for all of their signals. They talk, pretty broadly about their use cases, especially at KubeCon. They're also a big Kubernetes user in our community. But you also, if you watched any of the talks from San Francisco, you heard Anthropic and OpenAI and Tesla talk about these use cases as well. But it doesn't just end with big companies with lots of resources to build custom stacks. You see startups here as well, Temporal, Lovable. It's a trend also fueled by the fact that companies want more and more access and control over their observability data so they can apply AI to it. So they can build AI-enabled SRE features, which you could try to find it on the market, but it's a nascent use case. There's not a lot of off-the-shelf solutions. You need access to your own data to do that. So many more companies are doing it, and we're making it easier. So I mentioned Mike Shih. He formed a company called HyperDX that recognized this trend and built an open source observability stack on top of ClickHouse. So in San Francisco in May, we announced ClickStack as generally available. We now host it in our cloud as well. Mike is going to talk about the latest news there. We've been very, very busy since May. Data warehousing. You'll hear from Melvin about our platform investments here. And the thing to recognize here is the data warehousing space also is moving to more and more open trends, open data formats, open data lakes. We're embracing them, obviously, because, again, our roots are in open source, but also because we really think that one thing that's missing here is an interactive query layer on top of data lakes. A lot of existing query layers are really optimized for batch-oriented workloads. And it's not enough. When it comes to, again, putting AI on top of your data warehouse, you need a much more interactive experience. When I ask a question, this is just an example, obviously. I don't search for London prices every day. There's other questions I'm asking of my data warehouse. But I expect that response to come back quickly, because likely my first prompt is not going to be the right one. There needs to be a human interactive kind of latency in terms of me asking a question, getting a response from my data warehouse, asking another question. And from what we've seen, ClickHouse as a query layer on top of open data lakes forms a really, really powerful base here. This is why we partner with companies like Databricks. They also recognize the importance of that community and embrace other players coming into both Iceberg and Delta Lake spaces. It's very important, and we believe that, again, this is a trend that's going to keep growing. So yes, Melvin will talk about the investments in the platform there. We're going to talk about how we sped up queries on top of Iceberg, how we've improved joins, which is increasingly important in that space. And also, Zach will come back on stage and cover what we're doing in cloud to expose this as a turnkey stack using the MCP endpoint. But of course, AI/ML, this particular use case isn't seeped in a lot of data. It's not only about agentic analytics. It's definitely one of the use cases. But there's also still more traditional model training, and ClickHouse is often used both for data prep and data transformation, as, for example, Poolside is doing in their model training use cases. For model training itself as an offline and online feature store, for model inference, for vector search, for observability, again, as I mentioned, it's just sort of it's a given that you'll need that in your use case. So there are many places where you can apply ClickHouse if you're more of a data science, right? Or you're supporting data science teams. So this is something that, again, Zach will cover, and he'll talk about some of our investments there. Having said that, we can talk all day as technologists about what we're building and why we think it's cool, but really the proof is in our customers' stories. So I'm super excited and humbled to be sharing the stage with Capital One, Ramp, Modal. Really excited to hear about their use cases, and I think you will really enjoy that as well.